Welcome back. Chapter 3 of Fire and Emergency Services Instructor. We'll be talking about instructional planning. So dig in, here we go. Okay, our learning objective. We need to explain the importance of organization, session preparation, and session logistics when planning to teach. A good instructor does not simply appear in the learning environment and begin teaching, just as good students do not simply arrive for a class and begin learning. Both must prepare for the experience. Both must have expectations and anticipations of what each wants to accomplish and how to accomplish it. This chapter will explain the following aspects of the instructional process. First one is planning to teach. We're preparing to teach and preparing students to learn. Second one is going to be training aid selection. This is choosing appropriate training aids for the information to be taught. And the third is going to be the learning environment continuity. We're tying each individual lesson plan together. And when I said final, I was teasing. I've got some course consistency. Presenting information that conforms to other information, standards, and accepted practices, especially within the training organization. And you can see here on the slide, why we're planning to teach. We have to organize those learning materials, prepare the class session, and ensure all logistic needs are met. Organization. Deeper dive. New fire and emergency services instructors will benefit from proper organizational skills, which will lead to success and result in a variety of benefits such as increased credibility, improved efficiency of learning environment presentation, effective use of time, talent, and materials. It's going to reduce stress, and meeting the legal requirements for record keeping. Instructors are often required to teach topics they have not taught before. Even a veteran instructor may be required to develop a presentation on an unfamiliar topic. To prepare to teach a new topic, instructors must first gain a thorough knowledge of the topic. You just can't go out there and shoot from the hip. This ensures that the instructor can perform the skills associated with the topic and answer any student questions. The instructor may already have his knowledge even if that instructor has not taught the subject before. And you can see here as instructors, it's just hitting our 2 bullet points. The big piece is the second bullet. We have to gain this thorough knowledge of the topic to ensure we can perform the skills and answer questions. Quick note, even with adequate time to prepare, if the instructor is not competent with the topic, it would be prudent that another instructor be assigned well in advance to instruct the class. An unqualified instructor not only risks the safety of the students, but also runs the risk of legal liability for providing incorrect or inaccurate information. Continuing session preparation. An instructor should be careful to complete the following tasks ahead of every class session. We need to read the lesson objectives, become familiar with the objectives requiring the students to know and perform. Review the lesson plan. Use an organization's standard lesson plan to determine what material must be addressed, what time frame is required, and what assistance, materials, and equipment are needed. Let's check what equipment is needed. Be familiar with our training aids. Know how to operate and use various pieces of equipment for student activities. We need to locate the required equipment. Arrange for additional equipment that will be necessary but is not already in the classroom or training area. Find avenues within the organization to acquire what is needed. Determine what skills must be taught. Practice the skill steps, or at least review the steps mentally by looking at pictures, equipment, or handouts. Any instructor who lacks recent experience or practice in a skill must take time to review it or determine a method of presenting it so that the skill is understandable to the students. Ideally, the instructor presents a skill at mastery level. That means they're very, very good at it. Review required lesson audiovisuals. Let's preview audiovisuals to prepare for engaging students in related discussions and applications. This step means being familiar with the lesson plan and knowing when and how audiovisuals are used. Next one is checking the documentation requirements. Check on, arrange for, and have available and ready all handouts, rosters, and other reports and records before class begins. Let's arrive early. Arriving early allows us to make sure that the training area is set up appropriately for the lesson and that all needed elements are in place and functioning properly. This may require a significant amount of time if the instructor is not familiar with the facility. The instructor must be familiar with the topic, familiar with the operation of all training aids, and be able to make logical, smooth transitions between sections of the material. For the new instructor, the best way to present an organized presentation is to practice the presentation. Practicing the presentation helps the instructor recognize any points where adjustments need to be made. It also helps to build personal confidence and create enthusiasm for the topic. Asking more experienced instructors how they approach teaching similar topics can be an excellent source of information for improvement. The term logistics, as used in the fire and emergency services profession, means the procurement, distribution, maintenance, and replacement of materials and personnel. Fire and emergency services organizations usually have a division or individual who manages logistics by providing the materials and equipment required to meet the mission of the organization and its various divisions. Within the training division, each instructor is usually responsible for acquiring the logistical support needed for any given lesson plan. Logistics may also consume class time. The completion of some skills requires cleaning portions of the training area or restocking, refilling, or replacing certain items. The organization or the type of lesson plan may require that students perform some of the following duties: cleaning any equipment used for the training session, returning the learning environment to its pre-training arrangement, or inspecting, cleaning, and replacing tools, just to name a few. Instructors need to calculate the time it takes to perform these duties. Allow yourself lots of time for these duties. The instructor is always responsible for ensuring that all materials and equipment needed are determined and arranged for before the beginning of the class. Organized instructors will have a checklist of necessary materials and equipment to ensure that nothing is forgotten. This list can be retained as part of the lesson plan documentation and used for future class sessions. Some of the things when we talk about arriving early on that checklist, you can see here, step 1, we're checking for missing items. You would be amazed in a firehouse how often things were there 2 days before and 2 days later they've been taken by somebody else to use or moved. And so secure that. Make sure, check for missing items. Let's review operations. Let's arrange our room layout, which we'll talk about in future chapters. Find replacements or make repairs of anything that we might need that's out of service or we can't find. And then step 5, we've always got a backup plan. What is our contingency plan, known as Plan B? If I can't have this piece of equipment, well, what else can I substitute that is going to be adequate for this lesson? You can see on some more session logistics. These are big pieces. Pet peeve of mine are instructors that show up 10 minutes before their class. Their students beat them there, and then nothing's set up. So they're looking for the PowerPoint projector or asking for, hey, could somebody make me copies? What's the Wi-Fi password? Those kind of things. And then class is supposed to start, let's say, for example, at 6 p.m. at night, but we don't get going until 6:30, 6:35. And then what really drives me crazy is the instructor tries to play it off like it's not an issue. Oh, it's an issue. If we say 6 p.m., Clint's there 45 minutes to an hour early if it's a new course for me, 45 minutes to a half an hour if it's something I've taught many times over, because I want to make sure that everything is ready to go and that I'm not going to stumble out of the starting gate. Okay, learning objective 2. We're going to describe factors to consider when selecting training aids for a lesson plan. Selecting the appropriate training aids to use with a lecture or demonstration requires planning. Procuring these aids is an important part of session logistics. However, the training aid recommended in a lesson plan may not be available. In these cases, instructors need to be able to adapt and select alternative training aids to meet the lesson plan needs. Based on the lesson plan, an instructor should select training aids that most appropriately illustrate or demonstrate the knowledge that the student must possess when the course is completed. For instance, when a course is intended to help company officers become certified to command a multi-company operation, a computer simulation program may be an effective training aid. Mannequins for training and evaluation are appropriate when students are required to successfully perform CPR-AED or artificial respiration. It really does depend on what you're doing. And once again, always have plan A and always have plan B and probably plan C. Continuing our training aid selection, you can see that learning objectives and lesson content, when we review it, it's going to show us what training aids we need. So in that piece, we'll look at class size and interaction also as we're looking at our training aid needs and how we're going to select those. Pace of learner and other learner characteristics also contribute to how we're selecting our training aids. So if we've got folks that, which we've talked about in the past, crawl, walk, run. If we're still crawl, we may be using a different training aid than an advanced group that is their skill set is more developed. And then practicing factors play in that. If we don't have access to an outdoor area, well then there's no reason to have a fire truck there. As simply as I could put that. Any training aids that an instructor uses in a lecture or demonstration must reinforce the desired learning objectives and lesson content. Instructors need to review the lesson plan, determine the content and objectives, and then select the training aid that will satisfy as many of the requirements as possible. When the source for the training aid is a professionally produced curriculum or single item, compare it to the desired lesson plan outcome. We may need to alter the training aid or use only the relevant portion of it. When you do not have an existing training aid, it is then necessary to create one using the technology that is available. For example, when the lesson content concerns fire behavior and the learning objective is to understand the fire tetrahedron, a simple digital image or drawing illustration illustrating this theory on a dry erase board can be appropriate. If the illustration is part of a longer video on fire development, the instructor can cue the video to the appropriate sequence before class in order to maximize class time. If no image exists in the purchased curriculum, the instructor may look for an image elsewhere or create one. And you can see on our slides that we are hitting all the areas of any training aids used must reinforce the desired learning objectives and lesson content, may need to alter training aid or use only relevant portions of it, and may be necessary to create training aids using technology that is available. Teaching situations where instructors want to encourage student participation and interaction can influence training aid choice. With a large class, the class size and learning environment arrangement may limit interaction to a question and answer period at the presentation's end. Spontaneous diagrams on an easel pad or marker board can facilitate a highly participative coaching session in a small class. Class size and seating arrangements have a direct relationship to the size of the image or training aid the class is expected to view. For example, using an easel pad in front of a 200-person audience seated in a lodge auditorium obviously will not be effective. A large projection screen would be a better choice. On the other hand, an easel pad or marker board may be ideal for debriefing 6 trainees after a practical training evolution. The effectiveness of a training aid is affected by its safe application in an instructional environment. One factor in a training aid's suitability is the intended pace of learning. When the expected learning is fast-paced, training aids can be integrated into the lesson plan to allow a class to move quickly through the information. When the lesson's content is primarily unfamiliar to students, training aids that allow an instructor to proceed at a slower, safer pace are more appropriate. One strategy for teaching new material is to assign outside reading assignments from textbooks or self-study guides before the beginning of class. Guided discussions using marker boards, easel pads, or large illustrations used in class can reinforce new material. Students can then view a video for review and reinforcement. To give students an opportunity to apply new knowledge and skills and to make the new application meaningful, include practice time and the training aids or props needed in the lesson plan. For example, you should provide a set of life safety rope lengths for a class on tying hitches used in technical rescue. The training aids required when applying concepts or skills such as incident management, accident investigation, personnel supervision, problem solving, or fire investigation may become more difficult to select. Training aids for prospective incident managers can include practice scenarios using the following resources: paper, marker boards, or easel pads, tabletop models, technology-based training, interactive and virtual reality equipment. Similarly, investigation skills can be applied via written case studies, computer-based scenarios, structures acquired or purpose-built for practical evolutions, or staging an accident or incident scene for the student to physically investigate. Each of these applications requires that instructors carefully plan the use of training aids in the lesson in order to give students meaningful application of their new knowledge and skills. Learning objective 3, we're going to identify potential events that can impact learning environment continuity. Continuity ensures that presented information flows in a logical and understandable stream. Many factors can affect learning environment continuity, but instructors can take steps to reduce their effects. Instructors should anticipate problems and prepare contingency plans for potential events such as instructor changes, weather variations, instructional resource variations, differences in learner characteristics, and differences in knowledge levels. There are times when an instructor is not available to teach a scheduled class. Ideally, that instructor or the instructor supervisor contacts someone familiar with and experienced in teaching that lesson. Instructors should carefully prepare for instances where other instructors may be involved in a class they are teaching. Trading control of instruction may affect the class continuity because all instructors have their own personal perceptions, views, beliefs, and methods of teaching. It is possible that their ideas and methods may be different from those of the lead course instructor. The lead course instructor can plan to maintain continuity by following these suggestions. 1, let's know our fellow instructors. Fellow instructors meet and exchange ideas through in-service training, meetings, conferences, and seminars. If an instructor must call on another to substitute or assist in teaching a class, it should be someone whom the instructor knows and trusts, who has similar ideas and methods, and who has similar or better experience. Next, we can prepare the students. Ideal situations do not always occur, and the desired instructor, substitute, or assistant may not be available. Students become dependent on and familiar with the methods, attitudes, and personalities of their instructors and may not relate as well to a different one. Instructors should tell students in advance to prepare for what may be a different teaching style. The next one is meet with the substitute instructors or assistants to prepare for the class. Every instructor involved in teaching a class must prepare for it. The lead course instructor who arranges for a substitute or for assistants should meet with the substitute or assistants and perform the following. Outline the learning objectives and what must be accomplished in the lesson. Assign specific duties or skills. Show and orient each person to the teaching area and or classroom. Provide directions or assistance in locating and assembling equipment. Coordinate rest break and cleanup times, and perform any other duties needed to ensure a successful lesson. Weather changes can have an adverse effect on training activities and schedules. We as instructors have to build flexibility into courses that are scheduled during times of the year when inclement weather is possible. Extreme weather conditions may challenge a course's continuity as instructors attempt to teach the same skills during the summer heat and winter cold. You must be able to adapt the skills to the existing weather while still remaining faithful to the specific skill requirements. When teaching psychomotor skills, the learning environment should not distract students from attending to the lesson's objectives. Even though students may later have to perform the same skills under severe conditions on the job, these conditions are not conducive to learning the skill. Instructors should not expect their students to learn skills effectively in extreme weather conditions. On the other hand, instructors may decide to train or drill more experienced students in inclement weather conditions for the sole purpose of preparing students to face those conditions on the job. During inclement weather, instructors must keep student safety as the highest priority, ensuring safety measures account for adverse conditions. Students must be provided with the appropriate equipment, rehabilitation, and safety instruction that are applicable to the weather conditions. Note, in some jurisdictions and situations, there might be specific policies or labor management contract provisions regarding weather conditions and training. For instance, some labor management contracts have heat index provisions that limit training days that have a heat index less than 100 degrees Fahrenheit, or cold index provisions that relate to temperatures and wind chill to prevent injuries. Safety alert. Instructors should understand that there are conditions such as ice or snow where some evolutions cannot be safely performed. Even though the skills being taught in the evolution might have to be performed during the implementation of job duties under similarly adverse conditions, they do not have to be performed under those conditions while in training mode. If the instructor requires that the students perform such evolutions under unsafe conditions while in training mode, it could create liability issues for the instructor if a student gets injured. Sometimes it is best to postpone the class in the interest of safety. When scheduling equipment, use the same type of equipment in the learning sessions that is used in the testing session and on the job. Even though some brands may be less familiar to some students, using the same type of equipment is an important factor in maintaining the continuity of the course. When a group will be tested on tying knots using a certain type and size of rope, for example, students should also practice with that type and size of rope. When students use a certain type of SCBA on the job, train them on the same or generically similar equipment. This procedure is not only fair, but it also makes testing valid and reliable. Instructional resources used in training include the information, product data, skill sheets, and references required to meet the lesson plan requirements. When the information is available to all course instructors, instructors can maintain continuity during the planning of their course presentations. Course materials may also be substantially different from the latest training material being published in the fire and emergency services. The level 1 instructor should, whenever possible, verify that the information he or she is using for instruction is the most current information available. If the instructor discovers that updates to materials are necessary, she or he should consult with the individual responsible for purchasing and updating materials. Differences in learner characteristics lead to various learning styles and can create a challenge to instructors who are attempting to maintain class continuity. To maintain continuity, instructor has to be flexible and adaptable within the structure of the course in order to appeal to the learning styles of all of the students. Ideally, instructors adapt lessons that include a variety of teaching methodologies so that all types of students have the opportunity to learn through their preferred learning styles. This makes it more likely that students will gain the appropriate knowledge and skills and meet the lesson objectives. Instructors may discover that their students are less knowledgeable or more knowledgeable, remedial and advanced, about the topic for a daily lesson or for a course. You should be prepared to make adjustments in order to provide a successful, positive learning environment for both remedial and advanced students. Remedial knowledge level: when the knowledge base of a student or a group of students is lower than the level of the course material. Instructors have to adjust the teaching pace and expectation. You may need to budget more class time on review or practice. Students may need a review of basic skills or knowledge before they are ready to progress to the new material in the lesson. Reviewing previous material or skills may initially delay the lesson agenda or course time frame. However, it can allow students to feel more comfortable with their knowledge and abilities so that they feel ready to proceed. Assigning additional reading or study assignments for students to accomplish outside the class period may also help them advance in the class. Advanced knowledge level: when the knowledge base of a student or a group of students is more advanced than the material, instructors should review the material with students and then assign problems or exercises at the advanced level. When there is still time available, instructors have the following options. 1. We can preview the next lesson and involve students in discussions or exercises to determine their level of readiness. 2. We can have the group create exercises or scenarios and plan for the equipment they need to perform the exercises in the next lesson. Then arrange to have that equipment available for the next lesson. This option can be used when it is not possible to move on to the next lesson because of equipment limitations. 3. Have participants work together in groups to create test questions, complete with answer keys and text references. These tests can be used for study, debate, and discussion. Learning Objective 4. Describe aspects of instruction that help achieve course consistency. Recognize and teach any safety issues that are appropriate to a lesson. When instructors or standards require that students wear PPE on the fireground, students need to wear it when they train. When the lesson requires that students wear a protective hood during live fire training, all instructors involved in teaching live fire training must also wear one. You should plan skills and activities around the safest way to perform them. Instructors must inspect all learning environments and then eliminate or reduce potential hazards. In addition, encourage students to identify and report any safety concerns as soon as they are noticed. Teach students to perform psychomotor skills in a safe manner. Consistent, safe repetition of skills helps create a safety-conscious behavior pattern that students will continue to use after training is complete. When a jurisdiction has strict procedures or guidelines for performing a particular skill, it is even more important to ensure that lessons consistently comply with those parameters. Although there may be multiple ways to perform a particular skill, such as raising a 24-foot extension ladder for climbing, local SOPs, or state performance objectives may be very specific in how the skill will be performed. In these situations, consistency is essential. Training and resource materials consistency in the types of materials used in training is also necessary. Fire extinguishing agents, medical supplies, respiratory protection equipment, and decontamination products should be identical to the types used in everyday and emergency activities. This consistency gives students the knowledge of how the product or material works and how it is packaged and looks. Consistency also extends to the way that equipment and material is stored on the apparatus. Students perform more efficiently when they are familiar with a standard method of storing and accessing the equipment. Instructors draw on a variety of resources, such as trade journals, the internet, conferences, other training courses, and other instructors for their course materials. Instructors must ensure that all applicable sources can be cited to appropriate credible resource or standard and are accepted by the sponsoring training organization. To ensure course consistency, the resources should support the course's learning objectives and should not contradict each other. We as instructors must plan skills and activities around the safest way to perform them. Instructors must inspect all learning environments and then eliminate or reduce potential hazards. In addition, encourage students to identify and report any safety concerns as soon as they are noticed. Teach students to perform psychomotor skills in a safe manner. Consistent, safe repetition of skills helps create a safety-conscious behavior pattern that students will continue to use after training is complete. When a jurisdiction has strict procedures or guidelines for performing a particular skill, remember it is always imperative on us to comply with those. Training and resource materials consistency in the types of materials used in training is also necessary. Fire extinguishing agents, medical supplies, respiratory protection equipment, and decontamination products should be identical to the types used in everyday and emergency activities. This consistency gives students the knowledge of how the product or material works and how it is packaged and looks. Consistency also extends to the way that equipment and materials stored on the apparatus. And once again, students perform more efficiently when they are familiar with the standard method of storing and accessing the equipment. Okay, this is the end of lecture for Chapter 3. Once again, appreciate your hard work. Below you can see my information if you need me. Stay in the resource 1. Stay in your books. And I will see you on the next lecture.